Yeah.
All right.
Coming at you live.
Welcome back to the Watching Podcast.
The Watching Podcast. What do we watch,
Home
Delon?
of-
Yeah, what
we
technically?
watch birds. We changed our entire podcast format. Now
We're a bird watching podcast?
Yeah, I saw this canary the other week. Beautiful.
How was that, bro?
Magical.
Is it red?
Have you ever taken the time to just look at a bird and do nothing else? I got 50 photos on my phone right now. I'm just putting my phone on silent. I'm gonna show
wonder-
you.
They're all government cameras.
Oh yeah,
or
the
whatever.
government pigeons.
Yeah, the
Oh,
government
you one
pigeons.
of those people, dude? No,
You
dude.
gotta be.
Have you ever seen a baby pigeon? Exactly. Exactly.
That's so true.
That's so stupid.
That's the argument, by the way. That's all I've ever heard. Is, have you seen a baby pigeon? Well, I haven't seen a baby fucking canary either, but it doesn't mean they don't exist.
Little fucking chicks.
That is true, though.
Welcome back to the
Welcome back.
Conspiracy
Mine is
Theory
blown right now.
Podcast.
And we're back
I know.
in studio.
You know what I think it is? I think it's the heat.
That's making us delirious?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. A little bit, for sure.
Or why? What do you mean?
The heat.
What's the heat doing?
The heat.
Just putting everybody in the bad mood?
Yeah, they're playing basketball. They're going on tours.
They're playing
Dude, I
basketball.
tried. Yeah, there you go. I like that one.
Yeah.
I tried playing basketball, dude.
Really?
You can do it.
Too hot, too sweaty?
Bro, I was
Well, you
slipping on my
usually
own sweat,
You
dude.
usually play inside, no? Like at a rec center?
Yeah,
Or
that's
like-
why he's stepping on his sweat.
No, I
outside.
was playing outside, though. No, even worse inside in
Yeah.
the red.
And you're stepping on your sweat inside?
outside. Bro.
Actually does.
What?
That's even worse, bro.
Legitimately, that's why basketball players like we would just wipe our feet from like dirt, anything that can make you slip.
I
and
thought
shit.
they were just trying to be cool. I thought it was like
Nah.
and then to get grip on your hands, like you take off the
oh,
dirt.
shit.
And then it's,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
yeah,
I mean, it's a little nasty, but
It's a little nasty.
yes, it is. Like, I used to spit on the floor. Oh, my God. I just admitted that.
Don't invite them to your
Yeah,
rec
like, if you
center.
didn't have a wet
That's
towel, I would spit on the floor and just to have that.
Wow. And then when you kick people in the face, then you feel that double win, right? Like you spat on them and kicked them.
But they don't know.
I mean, shit.
Welcome back
Welcome back.
to the podcast with no name. My name, though, is Michael O.
Whoa.
Okay, first you say to emphasize
It's
it.
not that type of podcast, buddy.
Okay.
Whoa.
That's Tower
Whoa.
After Dark.
Oh, Tower
Yeah,
After
exactly.
Dark. Coming soon to a podcast near you. I got my guest today, Austin, in the back, rocking the mics and
Decided not to show off his.
rocking
cool
the
haircut.
ladies.
I know.
How you doing, Austin?
That's like,
That's a thumbs up if I've ever seen
That's what
one.
happens when I wake them up
Diamondbacks,
early
thumbs up.
and make them come watch Beatles stuff.
And as always, I
That's
gotta
my
introduce the people not in the back. We got Mr. John Eric Castro
How you guys doing?
sweating it up, spitting on his feet. You know how it goes. You know how it be. And then we got last but not least, the host of the show.
I thought you were the host, didn't you?
Nah, not today.
Not today.
That's as far as I get.
Mr. Carlos Del Torre, writer, director, supreme, Beatles lover.
Supreme.
Yeah. Beatles lover. German Beatles lover.
This isn't German. It came in like a gift set with a little Beatles car and like a special vinyl thing that somebody gave me for Christmas.
Dal
And it came
Filmato.
with this shirt.
I like it.
Welcome back to the WatchTower Podcast, the film review podcast on the Towercast Network.
I already did
by
all that.
cinema lovers, for cinema lovers.
Forgot that part.
Mr. Michael Delau already introduced us, so we can just get right into it. We're doing Julie Taymor's Across the
Babylon.
Universe. Yes, doing Julie Taymor's
Oh, we
Across the
already did
Universe.
You've been talking about this for
This
so
was my
long.
pick. This was indeed my pick this time around.
Why did it take you so long?
Why did it take me so long? That's got to be a good thing, right? I guess. I don't know.
I don't know. Is it critically acclaimed? Is it a cult classic? Is
Yo,
it
Depends who you
mama's
ask.
critically acclaimed.
bro? This gives me some furniture movie, bro.
That means she's classy and
Yeah,
respectable.
that's
Thank
like
you, bro.
award winning. Like, what?
Yeah.
Whoa, bro!
What kind of
You
award is
just
she
helped you out, you
winning?
just jump back
What
up,
kind of award
bro.
is she winning? She winning. So yeah, no. Why did it take me so long? I don't know. It's definitely
There's just too many films on the queue, right?
yeah. For the longest time, this film was my like favorite film of all time. It really was. It was for the longest time. This film like opened up my perception of what cinema and what musicals could be. Even before I ever wanted to be a filmmaker, it just taught me like how to use art in cinema, and that includes all of the above, right?
Oh yeah.
Here's a question: when did you start getting into this? Like, when was the first time? Like, this came out in 2007, so I
Yeah.
can only imagine it was around.
So I discovered this film when
Talking
it
to the
was Yeah, you're right. I discovered this film when it was like on cable, like HBO or
Really?
whatever.
Oh, wow.
That's where I first saw it.
Yeah,
And
money like that to have HBO?
yeah, no, we stole it, bro. What do you think?
The neighbor, man.
The neighbor was paying for that shit.
I had that little paperclip, the HBO one.
The Spice Channel one. So yeah, I saw it. And I remember just being like, "What the hell is this?" And you're right. This was 07, 08. Probably saw it 09, 08, 09 when it was on cable, right? So
Right.
I remember my bro. We knew the Beatles enough to like, yeah, it's pretty cool. It's good, great music. But we were still in our like heavy hip hop kind of learning days.
That's right, you were.
So we were. I remember telling my brother about this film. Like, dude, I just saw this movie. I don't know what the hell this is, but I love it. I don't know what I love about it. And I would listen to the soundtrack. My mom bought me the fucking CD soundtrack.
Oh, wow.
And would be in the car, and I'd listen to this thing nonstop. Just the soundtrack got to me, and then in my natural, I guess, curious form, just like Scorsese with Hugo, I was like, who made this and why do I love this music so much? And then dug deeper into who the Beatles are, and so this movie really heavily
That was the
introduced me to the Beatles.
catalyst for you.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, but again, it was just this thing like
man.
opening up this new form of movies because before this we were watching whatever comedies
Yeah.
and
Spider-Man.
right. But this movie, it just really opened me up on like what cinema is really, and Julie Taymor, and I started seeing her other movies because of it. So like things like Titus and Frida, and
Frida, yeah.
so she's just a very special storyteller, man, and she comes from the theater world. She's the reason. Julie Taymor is the reason that The Lion King is on Broadway. That was her.
Really?
Yeah. So The Lion King was her baby. So have you ever seen The Lion King on Broadway, either, traveling or whatever?
She got that going.
That art that's developed in this film, like, this was after Lion King, by the way, but
Yeah.
her style of using art, sculpting and specific, really like indigenous
Yeah.
art. She uses in every type of aspect. She's done a bunch of plays, but she was responsible for bringing Spider-Man to Broadway.
Oh my goodness.
That was her doing.
And you could definitely see those influences,
Yeah.
like the way that like musicals naturally feel like they're very much built for the stage.
Yeah.
Like it feels very much like a stage play. And the whole time I'm watching the film, I really felt like this could have been adapted towards stage,
Yeah.
but then it did encompass a lot of the elements
So-
in like cinema that you can.
Why didn't it?
Funny that you say that. She I just listened to this was out of coincidence. I think that's what like made me want to watch the film again. And you guys know, like for a week, I was like, I'm so excited to rewatch this. I haven't seen it in probably a year or two.
Yeah.
I probably try to watch it every year just because it's one of my favorites. But I heard a podcast like that was released like 2 weeks ago with her in it.
Oh.
And she was talking about like they asked her specifically. It's a podcast called It Happened in Hollywood.
Okay.
And it's a Hollywood reporter, and they interviewed her specifically about Across the Universe. So she gave kind of all the inside info of how this shit got made and what happened. But
Oh, nice.
the background with her is she when she graduated college, she went overseas. Well, she went to Indonesia and Vietnam and like all these different studied abroad, but stayed there to do like art collectives and like art. What are they called? Residencies and stuff like that for artists. And she learned how to sculpt, and she did puppetry, and she learned different art forms from different cultures.
Reminds me of
And
college.
she fell in love with that,
Yeah.
with these different types of art forms, and decided, I'm going to use that in whatever I do. When she got into theater, she used the puppetry aspects in there, and a lot of these, again, the indigenous art. She was talking about I think a Japanese festival that is puppetry that goes. It's a play that goes on for 36 hours.
That's unique.
So like people come in, they come out, like you don't stay there watching it, but it's a festival. So like you're encouraged to like grasp as much as you can, take a break, absorb it, interpret it, and then come back and be immersed in the world again.
And is it
I think it's called shadow puppetry or something.
Yeah,
like
but
that.
is it the same exact play, or is it something
Yes.
that's repeated, or
No, it's like it's expanded.
long
It's a lot of
form-
improv, but revolving around the same idea.
Oh,
But it's
God,
puppetry.
That's interesting. I haven't
It's
heard
a
of
shadow.
that.
I think it's called shadow puppetry because the shadows are the ones.
Yeah,
that are
no,
doing most of it.
the Japanese culture. I know
Yeah.
that they a lot of their storytelling and like shadow
Yeah.
puppetry would really develop, and that kind of shows in their films and
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that.
yeah.
So yeah.
So, anyways, that was her background. The reason I bring it back to this is because the tricky part about making anything Beatles related is who owns the rights. That's the tricky part for somebody as big as the Beatles, right? So the tricky part with making this happen is that she's just done Frida.
Hold on, before you go, was she a big fan of the Beatles? Is this a project that she wanted to do?
No, this is something she like.
It just came about.
It crossed paths organically. She wasn't seeking to do a Beatles project.
Oh, because one of those.
But she was being offered a bunch of directing roles because of Frida, and obviously that film did really well, and it hit really hard, and it made Salma Hayek really who she was in the States. So off the heat of that, somebody at Columbia at Sony said, hey, we have the rights to the Beatles music. Do you want to make a biopic out of this? And colleagues of her were already writing a script about the revolving around the Beatles music. So she was like, yeah, I actually do have an idea for this. She's like, well, you can use all 226 songs at your disposal and pick whatever you want and use it however you want. And that was the freedom that she was given. So she revolved the script around.
I'm gonna get a little controversial here.
Yeah.
How do you feel about somebody doing a film about the Beatles that didn't grow up admiring the Beatles?
It depends. It depends, because if you found them like me or anybody, right? Like if you found them later in life, and you like fell in love with them and you admired them.
I guess that's what I'm asking. Yeah. Did she go through the same process, or is it just
no,
something that
because she grew up in the 50s and 60s, so like she literally witnessed this in real time. So she had a little. So she had a little. Well, just like if you were born in that era, right, or you grew up in that era, you saw the Beatles on TV or whatever, and you knew who they were.
But you understand what I mean, right? Like, how do you feel about like somebody that's never played basketball?
Do a basketball movie.
The only difference.
Sometimes I have the best.
Because you're a big fan of it. Like,
I have the best example for you. I don't think there's a wrong answer, because, and I'll let you answer that, but. Sometimes an outsider's perspective will see stuff that the fan isn't seeing. So, like, let me get the best example for this is Raging Bull. Scorsese didn't know a single thing about boxing, and when De Niro brought on the project, he was like, "I don't know anything about boxing. Nothing. I don't know anything, but I'll do it. Like, I'm excited to get into this, and it's arguably the best fucking boxing movie of all time. I mean, it just depends how passionate they are about the subject, right?
True.
Also, it's kind of like when you're growing up with it, I feel like maybe you have nostalgia towards certain points. So certain songs that are like, oh, that came out like on my birthday, that's more important, but that might not be the best one in the collection.
Yeah.
Where somebody else,
biased.
Where somebody else who comes in and is seeing it all fresh and is able to see the whole package, then they're gonna, like you said, have a completely different opinion.
Not just that, but it's important to note that, like, for those of you who haven't seen it, obviously, as we always encourage you, go watch the film and come back. It's on Max, if I'm not mistaken.
It's also on DVD.
VHS too.
I actually do have it on DVD. That DVD copy is the one I've had for 15 years, although that's the only reason I keep it.
I'll take it.
Just go to www.freemovie. I just know. God.
Yeah. Anyways, it's not a biopic. It's important for people to know this is not a Beatles biopic.
No.
But it does draw a lot from their own lives. It does draw a lot from their own personalities to tell this story that took place in the era where they became famous.
Oh, and also it takes a lot of like moments from like the Beatles, I guess, kind of like the famous pictures or like the video of them like running through the streets and mimics some of that, or like the rooftop
it pays
stuff.
homage for sure.
Yeah. So,
but yeah, this just I'll give a synopsis and then we'll give our ratings. Across the Universe is about a group of people, but primarily about Jude and Lucy, who somebody from the UK who jumped ship to come to the US to find their dad.
Literally.
And then literally kind of just jump ship and meets this girl through a friend of his that he meets on the first day he's in the States. And ultimately falls in love with her, and they go through society together, because this is the era where Vietnam and the war is happening.
Civil rights movement.
I mean, just the 60s were just ever changing for everything. It changed the world, but it also, in my personal opinion, it impacted art, cinema, music in a way that no era has after that or before that. I really do think that the 60s were this pivotal changing point. Like, I always bring that up in cinema because 1968, 1969 were the year that cinema changed forever. Things like Easy Rider made the push into cinema of like realism and stuff like that we weren't exploring before. And European cinema, and they were already doing it. They were years ahead of us, and we weren't doing that in American cinema. So,
true.
But that was because of guys like Elvis and the Beatles, like revolutionizing music to expand pop culture and to expand, just change everything. I mean, so we're talking about art, Andy Warhol and Jackson Pollock and all this stuff. Like everything was changing. So I think it's the most influential era of art, in my opinion. That just kick-started everything else to like
60s.
Yeah, the 60s. So again, Jimi Hendrix, Woodstock, everything, just everything about that era just fucking changed, you
The
know.
original Woodstock, none of this 99.
Right. Fun fact, I showed these guys a book a long time ago. I might have showed it to you too. Scorsese was a PA on the...
No!
I bought a
I
book.
just imagine him.
I bought a book.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's the weirdest thing.
I bought the book because I knew this. I knew this because that's where he met Thelma Schoonmakers, his longtime editor. They met because they were both editing assistants and PAs on the set of the documentary, right? So I bought a book from, shout out to Literarity and Bill, got this Woodstock book, and I'm like, I'm just gonna see. I'm gonna flip.
Comes out.
Yes, I'm gonna flip through it to see if I find Scorsese's. I know he was there. And I flipped through it, and there's the president of Woodstock, the festival or whatever. There's a picture of him, and then there's a dude on the bottom of the stage going like this, and it's fucking Marty.
For real?
And then on the bottom it says a young Martin Scorsese at Woodstock PAing for whatever.
Did he already have white hair?
No, this fucking, I think he's 21 or something, you know.
That's
But
awesome.
anyways, this again, that era for me changed everything. So
True.
this is what the film revolves around. It's not just Lucy and Jude, but Jude is an immigrant, obviously, and we get to see kind of his whole interaction at the time of being in the States and being at risk to being kicked out, but not being drafted in a war that everybody's fighting against or for. And then her brother gets drafted, and it's just an amazing. Every character in this film does have a really compelling arc. And when you do an ensemble cast and a musical ensemble cast, that's really hard to do. So just that's Across the Universe ratings.
Perfect.
I want your rating first. No, I'm kidding.
Mine's gonna be a little controversial.
Oh, daddy! Well, this picture is, by the way, this film tears people in half.
It's a safe
Look,
space,
it's
Castro.
a two-part. I think La La Land did it better, but
All right.
obviously
Fair.
this one came first. So
Yeah.
obviously probably La La Land got a little bit of it.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is I think I like the way La La Land did the whole singing out of nowhere.
That's
with this
interesting.
one, whereas with this one was a little.
I feel the complete opposite.
It would always like just
yeah,
it would
like in the
kickstart with
bowling,
the scene,
in the bowling alley is just kind of like.
That's awesome.
No, I like it. I like
scene.
it. I like those. It's just.
Yeah.
I guess I got a little chipped out with.
That's
La La
really
Land, 'cause
interesting.
La La Land was just so unique and so
I
into the
think
punch.
That's interesting because I genuinely feel that this film, this musical does, in my opinion, it does it best to like not feel like we're just breaking into song.
but-
like for the dialogue, we get into the song
Okay, no, yeah, for
naturally.
sure. La La Land has that, but I mean, this
I
one
think
was
you just, like-
I wanted it to be a little bit more.
subtle.
What do you mean? I'm confused. I thought you meant like when they break into song.
Yeah.
So this one didn't do it.
I liked the way La La Land did it.
More
and,
like-
and I know you're saying it's a little bit more La La Land's a little bit more.
Like I
Yes,
think
yes,
what
yes,
happens
yes.
is that
This one's a
I like
little
that.
more organic. Okay, for musicals,
yeah, I
you
didn't want
like.
to say organic when I was thinking of the word, but it's just like I didn't like.
I'm glad you
I
have that
like it was like,
perspective.
yeah, how you doing? And then la.
Yes,
Yeah.
I love that. I really do.
I
But I'm
like
glad
that
you
kind of
have that
just-
perspective
dig that.
because
That taste, I don't know.
because the La La Land thing is inspired by classic American musicals, right? So
Okay.
and French musicals that you're seeing a production, you're seeing this massive, so breaking into song is a little more showy.
Right.
So I'm glad you saw the difference, but I think for something like this, something on
It works.
the heavy subject matter is more like if people were gonna break into song like that, like Les Miserables,
No.
or like I don't know, a Fiddler on the Roof, people wouldn't buy it.
No, exactly. No, I see what
So,
you're saying,
but
I
I'm
guess
glad you brought
that's
that up.
why I started off. It was a two-parter. Like,
Okay.
I think La La Land did it better, but
Yeah.
obviously, But yeah, overall, so the acting was great. I'm a big Jim Sturgis fan. I'm a big Rachel Wood fan.
Yeah.
I'll give it an 8.7.
Okay.
Because I'm
I
not
thought you
a
were
big
gonna go
Beatles
lower.
fan, but I like Beatles.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? But I'm
Austin's on the
I'm
same
not
boat.
that type of Beatles.
Yeah. You're not, I wore the shirt. I wore the shirt.
I own shirts.
Interesting.
8.7.
And what's
8.7.
7? Let's go around the room. I want Austin's next.
I give it a soft 8.
Soft 8? Why?
Just that I wasn't a big fan of the flow of it.
Of the flow?
Yeah, just of the entire film. Like
Okay. But what was the flow? Or
I
lack
felt
of
like
flow?
I felt like the story was jumping a lot everywhere.
The what?
Oh.
The story?
Yeah, like the plot.
It was just kind
What
of.
do you mean? It's pretty straightforward chronologically.
It kept bouncing back a lot, and it's just
I can see what it means.
Between like
between the different characters.
character
right?
perspectives.
Too
Okay.
much.
Soft 8.
Soft 8.
Mr. Lalone.
Yeah. And I didn't appreciate you guys, saying every single Beatles reference while I'm trying to enjoy the film.
We said like 2.
I feel you, dude.
We said like 2.
No, it was like every single one.
No, I just I like the one part that during the movie, I looked over at Austin like, wait for this next scene, you know, and then you just looked over at me.
That's the worst.
No,
That
it's
was me
because
today.
he was
I
doing
was a little excited at the
like
beginning.
the first 4 scenes was like, dude, this scene's amazing. Wait for this scene.
Because wait, because you know how we are.
Watch this.
No. You know
Okay,
how because no.
am I
That's the
doing?
difference. Because you know how we are. These 2 idiots were joking around for the first act of the movie.
Oh, okay.
So I was
Honestly,
like, wait, yo, stop
can't
joking around
defend
really
you
quick.
there.
Just feel this really quick, and
I'm
then
with you there. There's certain
Honestly,
parts where you just got to.
Maybe it's third party perspective, but I did not feel like we're making any jokes, and then you would still say, wait for
you
this part, you know? No.
I have cameras in my house alone. I'll show you.
Oh my god.
No, but yeah.
I mean, the one
anyways.
the restroom's on. I'm gonna go with Austin. I want to give it a soft 8 too. You know what? But that does have room to move up because I have questions right now. But I'll say soft 8. Cinematography really interesting, and then also I mean for mid 2000s I was impressed with like how they blended in like the CGI and all those magical elements, especially after the bowling scene. There was all these weird kind of like psychedelic visuals, and that was to like mimic the time that they were in. So that's super interesting. I love the way that all that
Bruno
kind of...
Del Bono.
I'm not
She's
too sure.
He did Inside Llewyn Davis.
Oh my goodness.
He's a Coen Brothers guy. He did Amelie.
Oh, and I know that you say that I need to see that one.
You'll appreciate Amelie.
But
he did the French Dispatch though.
Now you gassed.
no, he didn't.
Well,
Probably as a second.
He acted in it.
Oh.
Okay. I was like,
Francois Marie Charvet.
can I see what character he was? Like,
Well, it's on IMDb, but Francois.
That's your next pick, right?
French Dispatch.
no.
Oh, I thought it was.
He did Tragedy Macbeth. He is one of the
The
Coens
new one.
guys.
Oh shoot.
Yeah, man.
Well-
But he did Ballad of Buster Scruggs. He was the DP of Ballad of Buster Scruggs. He
Like
is the Coens guy. Oh my
Damn.
gosh! I wonder if he did A Serious Man since we just did it. Oh shit! He did the Half-Blood Prince. Austin. He's a DP on that.
Well, in that case,
Harry Potter.
I'll still stay by it. I mean, like I was really impressed by the cinematography. Really dynamic. There was one shot I didn't like, but I mean, it's such a small bit that it's okay. I'll forgive it. There's a one shot where the main guy Jude is standing. It's when he first comes to America, and he's standing in the middle of like town square and in New York. And then the camera spins around him. But I thought that maybe they could have used like a better dolly track or something like that, because it felt like a handheld. Like I'm just running around the guy. Like it didn't feel very smooth. That was just
meant not to be smooth. Maybe
It was Jude or it was
it was Jude.
Malcolm.
No, it was Jude because Jude just got there, and literally he's standing in
In
the
New
middle.
York?
Yeah, in New York, and he's trying to figure out like where he is, and it's that whole thing. And there's one shot where basically the camera looks up at him to see the buildings and him looking up at the buildings and spins around him, but it's not.
I don't think it was him. I think you're talking about Malcolm because it was during the day, with the businessmen are doing the choreography.
Yeah, but wasn't that
wasn't Jude. That was Malcolm.
Okay.
It was with the guitarist of the black dude. He that's him. That was his shot. It was his scene.
Okay, fine. Malcolm. Still don't like the shot. I still thought that
Fair.
it could have been.
No, I
tweaked.
see what you're saying.
Yeah. But other than that, I mean, I really like the composition, cinematography. I love when any film's able to mimic elements of that time in the visuals and all that.
Effectively, right? Not like
effectively.
forced.
It didn't feel cheesy. You
And you're
understood
right.
what
The
it was trying to
CG
do.
was a little ahead of its time. Like it could have been bad. It could have been worse than that.
Well, that's
Like,
where they
the
knew how
CG
to
was
like
actually
blend
pretty
it in.
good.
So I really appreciated that. The one issue I have with I think musicals that are like jukebox musicals is how much of it can sustain itself. That if you've never heard any of these songs, it still works perfectly. And how much is it like you're gonna love this movie because you know all the songs already.
Yeah.
Like if I didn't already know the songs, that's where I'm still kind of questioning would I have loved
I have
it
to tell
as
you,
much. You know?
I think this, and again, naturally unbiased, but I think this is the best jukebox musical, like the execution, because
Compared
to like freaking Hairspray or what's the new Bruce Springsteen one that just came out, I Feel Alive or something.
That was horrible.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like in terms of jukebox musicals that revolve around a specific artist's catalog, like for instance,
Was Elvis one of the jukebox?
I don't know if it would be categorized
Would
as
that be
musical.
categorized as
Yeah.
jukebox? Would it?
Yeah, because they're already made songs that are just being redone into the thing. But also, Elvis wasn't really a musical.
No, it wasn't really musical. That's what I'm
Yeah,
saying.
it was more
But
like
no, like for
Oh,
instance,
yeah.
the one that I can compare it to right off the bat is like the Elton John one that just came out.
Mm.
That wasn't the strongest thing ever, and it really turned into this weird musical halfway through the picture. But I do think that in terms of adaptation into the story,
Yeah.
I think this is very strong. Like, because you're saying that if the scenes can stand alone with the music, I think if you weren't, in my opinion, if you weren't a Beatles fan or if you're not a Beatles fan,
Yeah.
the songs are super adaptable into like when they use "I Want You" for the draft.
Yeah.
You know, when they
No,
use
and that's
I've
one
just
thing
seen
I
the
will
face or the
say.
meet cute stuff.
That
When
is
they
pretty
just,
good,
I mean,
yeah.
it's
Because
really pretty
with
done
a lot of
pretty
those
great.
songs, they're meant to be romantic, at least when they were first made.
Correct.
But then this one, they take those songs and they really put a different
Yeah.
meaning on it, and then that really pushes the story forward
Yeah.
and all that. And I mean, you really did answer it before by saying that you didn't know a whole lot of the Beatles catalog and you didn't know a whole lot
No.
about their history and everything. And the film, without it, was able to
it
kind of
blew that
kickstart
door open.
Yeah.
It blew Pandora's box open for me. But more than that, what I think is special about this film is if you're not a Beatles fan, you're gonna appreciate how they use the music in the story. If you are a Beatles fan, you're gonna wonder, shit, man, they really changed the tone of this song to fit the film. And I kind of like it. Like, there's a couple songs in the soundtrack that I like better than the Beatles version.
Really?
Like, I've Just Seen a Face. I've Just Seen a Face, the bowling alley.
Yeah.
I like it better than the original version.
Mm.
And again, it's
and
probably
you know
because
what?
I heard
Yeah, I
it
was gonna say,
before.
It's funny
you know.
because there was times when I didn't like it, like especially when Revolution.
Oh, what? You didn't like that?
I didn't like it because
Oh my God,
I
scene is so
loved
great.
that song from
Yeah.
the Beatles, and I knew the pacing of it. So when
Yeah.
you would sing it, it was one of those like I knew it was just a personal thing. Like I could feel that.
Because
He's
you
off
know
in
the
the
song.
pacing.
Well, I mean,
no,
that's
no, but
hard.
that's
That's
the weird thing.
hard.
That's the weird thing where it's kind of like, okay, I need to get over that, and I
Yeah.
can recognize that cognizantly. Like I'm not just gonna be like, I don't like that scene. I don't
Again,
know why.
that,
It's
to
like
me,
no,
that
I know.
scene and the use of that song because of the context. I mean,
Yeah.
she's
Oh,
out there
no.
fighting a revolution,
Great.
and
It's
he's
great.
fighting
No,
his own
yeah.
revolution with her, and
It
that
fits.
I think it's perfect. I think it's done perfectly
No,
for
it's
something like that.
wonderful, and I mean,
But
like,
I see what you're saying, like the struggle of knowing the music and getting
Yeah.
over what you know of the original to be able to.
It's weird, and I'll finish off the statement, and then we can talk more about the film after your rating. But I have that issue with like superhero films now because there's
Oh,
so
some
many
shit.
that have been made, and there's so much that you have to know prior to that one.
I agree.
That
That's
then,
true. That's
when
true.
like I
a good
watched
point.
like Endgame that everybody watched and everybody thought was amazing.
I
I was
stopped
like,
there.
huh?
I stopped there.
But you watched it, right?
Yeah.
yeah.
It was so good, but it was only good because you knew everybody and all the
everything,
situation
That is
and what was at
true.
stake and all that. And that was to me the first time I'd watched the film. I'm like, could I have enjoyed it at all if I
Do you
didn't
feel?
know?
Do you feel
That's
that
a
that's
good
the
way.
case here? Because again, in my opinion, I don't think you. If you don't need to know, in my opinion, you don't need to know the Beatles' music to know to be immersed in the story.
No, and that's the thing. I mean, it's a question. It's not so much I'm trying to say that a
Yeah.
film is
Oh,
bad
okay.
or good if
Yeah.
you don't know or do know the prior subject
You're
matter.
wondering if
yeah,
it-
but I
yeah.
do think that that's an interesting thing to explore
Yeah.
when films ask the audience to bring something beforehand.
I think the
you know?
one that I mean,
Yeah,
Castro and Austin are gonna have the more perspective because you and I are Beatles fans.
Yeah.
So they're probably gonna have more perspective on this. Was I know it was his first time watching it, but was it yours?
I had it like when it first came out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Austin, you being like it being the first time watching it and you not really knowing Beatles music or caring for it, is
Well, that's
there?
a perfect. Yeah, that's a perfect.
Did
question
it?
to ask.
Did the story? I know the flow of the story, but that's just you're an editor. You're gonna pay attention to that more than anything. But
Did the music?
yeah, the music.
I felt like some of the music didn't fit to the story.
Like
it
what?
felt forced. That's why I'd
Yeah.
asked you when we were watching it, like, did they write the script and then pick the music, or pick the music?
No,
then
no,
the
no.
script?
They
No, but
revolved the
that's why I
script
had
around.
asked you because
Yeah,
it
yeah.
did feel like some of the music was out of place.
Maybe that's what,
Like what?
I can't give you specifics,
yeah,
but
you
some
don't
of
know
them.
the songs.
No,
Yeah, I
I
don't
mean,
know the
just
songs,
the-
but there was just
the
some of them that I
scenes.
was like, the lyrics and the tone of the song
Or-
doesn't feel like what the
You know
story's
what?
going.
There's that thing that I've also had
okay.
issues with. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, my bad. Man, I just started.
No, I was just gonna say I've also had issues with like there's certain movies and it's mainly in score, like you'll see in like Hallmark films especially that do this terribly, where there's not anything that is triggering a romantic moment with these characters, but then they'll put a romantic score, and automatically when they walk into each other, the audience is just like, they're meant for each other, they're in love, and all this kind of stuff. And it's kind of like, the actors didn't do it, the script didn't do it, let's just throw in some really good music and that'll kick it. And I mean, maybe for Austin it's the same way, where I think a lot of the lovey-dovey scenes where they put in a lot of this like loving, where Jude's falling in love with Lucy.
Yeah.
Like sometimes it'd be a perfectly fine scene, and then
that's one I was thinking.
Yeah, it's like, and now let's put in this song, and you're gonna know that this guy is falling hard. You know,
I didn't feel that. Well,
lyrics,
that's, by the way, it's also north of 2 hours, right? There's 2 hour and 15 movies, so like, there's multiple relationships to be explored in this film, and if you're gonna get fixated on one, it's not gonna leave much room for much else, right? So I don't know. I disagree personally. I don't think I think
it's a concept to explore. Yeah. It's not to say that the film did it bad. I mean, if Austin feels, or if anybody feels like personally like, it was forced. I mean, it's a very subjective place to be, because I can't tell you pinpoint. Yeah, that was for sure forced, because like you said, when you look at it on paper, and even when you look at it as it was played out,
I'm looking at it as a storyteller. Like, as a storyteller, I usually cringe at those moments. And like I said,
it's a weird place to
like
be.
I've said before on this podcast, like I'm able to acknowledge a film, like, and this is a perfect example. If I love a film, if I've loved the film for my whole life, and then I'm still able to rewatch it and either be like, yeah, that was a weaker film.
Okay.
I'm not. Now, I'm appreciating this film even more as a storyteller, because I know exactly what this director was trying to execute and the limitations she had to be able to execute it. Okay. She was working with on actors, for instance, or first discovery actors. The only one that wasn't a discovery was Evan Rachel Wood, because she had just done 13. That's a few years back. That's what really brought her into the stratosphere. But the rest of the actors were discoveries. They weren't seasoned actors by any chance, by any stretch of that imagination. But in this film, they fucking killed it, this ensemble. So anyways, I think I'm able to discern that personally. For me, like, despite the fact that I love this film and I've loved it for a long time, every time I watch it, I realize, just in my opinion, how underrated it is, and how people just really are sleeping over it, because for one, there hasn't been a better use of the Beatles anything, unless it's been a documentary.
Yeah.
There's some documentaries that are fucking amazing from the Beatles, or docu-series, the Beatles anthology, the George Harrison documentary that Scorsese did. There's some fucking amazing documentaries out there, but a narrative film to use the Beatles material, number one, there hasn't been a better one than this, in my opinion. Number two,
I'll go with you.
Modern musicals aren't this. Like, most modern musicals suck, especially from that era. When you're talking about films that would come out like fucking Hairspray, or you know what I mean, like that.
Very forced, very
Footloose, and fucking like
loose in their story,
shitty films.
No, this one, I'll give it points there, and that's why I don't want to ever. I can't see giving this a lower rating. The story is extremely dynamic. I think the way that they use songs to kind of shift.
Also, history and pop culture, by the way. The way this film uses that as its backdrop is fucking insane.
No, it's super dynamic. I mean, going from like, I'm going to go over there. I'm going to go from Liverpool to the United States to find my dad. Finds his dad, kind of realizes it's like a dead end. There's not a whole lot. You think that's
what the story's going to be about,
right?
Yeah,
you
and
think
then he's shot down right at the beginning. It's not
instantly
about
he says, I'm not here to interrupt your life. I'm not here to do anything other than just say I exist and see that you exist.
Yeah,
that's it. Great line. And then after he bounces off that wall, then it kind of kickstarts, finding people, meeting people, falling in love, but then falling in love with somebody who's finding purpose in life because they're getting out of college. And
what I think is beautiful about this too is most people don't pay attention to the socioeconomic dynamic of it. They're rich, Judas poor. They come from money. He doesn't, and they're still able to connect in this like nomad kind of esque, a bohemian-esque thing that was happening in the 60s and 70s. Was like, let's just all go to New York and become artists.
Yeah.
And I don't care if you come from money or if you don't. Let's just fucking make this happen and follow something that's very exciting right now.
I love the dynamic of like, there's people that come from a lot of privilege that then come back down and say we should be fighting for something better. And then there's him.
You hate people who do that.
Yeah.
You really do, like, because they're snobs who just want to look good. And these guys are like, no,
and with,
I hate my rich life. I want to like start
trying to go from like being somebody who's working class,
Yeah.
does a 9 to 5 just to put food on the table.
Yeah.
To I want to be an artist. I want to express myself. I've never been able to do that because when I was in Liverpool, I was just on the boats, or fishermen and all that kind of stuff.
So what did you rate it?
This is sitting at about a 9 for me.
Really?
Yeah, this is at about a
Damn.
9. Yeah.
What did you give La La Land?
I don't remember.
I think like a
Probably
9.3.
somewhere in that range. Yeah, 9.3.
Wow, that's
9.7.
kind of low for it being your favorite.
Well, again,
For the
remember,
longest time, it's still-
I think I'm able to acknowledge
bias.
where my bias and acknowledge the where my palette in cinema has been, right?
So what do you think it lacked?
I think it
Color.
Yeah, this film was extremely colorful.
Yeah.
I
I
think
was like-
I think it was a product of its era a little bit, and I think that's what happened.
Yeah.
It's 07.
What do you mean?
It's 06. Because remember, it's in my least favorite era of cinema is the early 2000s and the 80s.
The 80s, yeah.
The early 2000s were just a reflection of she used how to use beautiful film effectively, but it was still a factor of the studio needs this to succeed in theaters, which it didn't. So they were gonna tweak certain things to make them. By the way, she had a final cut, and she almost sued Sony because they cut her film.
Really?
They cut it. They made a different version of it, but they couldn't legally release it. They were just trying to coerce her, let's release a different one for the theaters. And she's like, I will slap an injunction and I will fucking sue you guys
Hell
if you
yeah.
do this. This film will come out how I see it fit. And it did, and she fought for it, and the film bombed. It wasn't about the studios or making money. It was about releasing this beautiful piece
But
of
it
art.
makes you think if they would have went the studio way, it could have.
But that's the thing,
But no,
I
I
feel
think if it would have been the studio way, it would have fallen into the trap of the early 2000s films that sucked. That trap of cheesy.
True, but I think it would have gotten out there a little bit more.
Yeah, mate.
It would've
Yeah,
had a
you're
little
right.
bit more
But
Yeah, but then we
R&D.
wouldn't be talking about it now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's films that
Yeah.
they bombed. I mean, the last one we talked about was Citizen Kane that
Right.
bombed.
Yeah.
But then because of its merit, it's
Did this one really bomb or it
Yeah,
just kind of?
it did pretty bad. No, it did
they-
pretty bad.
Oh shit.
It did pretty bad, but for the same reason. I mean, then Julie Taymor says it in the podcast because the studio was pissed at her for her wanting to release her cut. They didn't promote the film.
That's what
They didn't put any money behind marketing,
tricky.
so-
It only made 24 million. Opening weekend didn't even break a million.
With a budget of what?
45.
Oh,
Yeah, 45 made,
that's
made
a
half
bomb.
its budget.
That's a bomb.
It made half its budget.
it's a rough day for somebody.
Yeah, dude.
So, if you think about it, I know Austin has seen. I know you've seen it. We all, the three of us saw it. When you see something like Cirque du Soleil's Love, where you're gonna use the Beatles music for this beautiful piece of art, it's almost like if Love would have only survived a year in Vegas and didn't do well after that, it's still this art installation that survived for whoever saw it. So the beautiful
I see
thing
your
about
point.
cinema is sure you missed it in the theaters, and they'll bring it back every once in a while to theaters. By the way, I saw it in theaters 2 years ago. So
I see where you're
if
going.
you can catch it, great. But it's this beautiful piece of art that wasn't
Maybe not meant for them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So if I were Julie Taymor, it's a huge risk, man. As a director, I'm gonna make this how I see fit. I would have done exactly what we should have done. It might end my career, but this is the only time I have the Beatles catalog to make the piece of art that I want to make.
Yeah.
If the
I
fucking
respect that, dude, because especially because you're a Beatles fan. It's
Yeah.
like, yo, this is not even.
I'm not
passion
gonna
project.
listen to the studio heads just to make this popular popcorn musical. I'm gonna make a true piece of art because, by the way, the Beatles who are still alive, Ringo Starr, Paul McCartney, and Yoko Ono.
There's a little controversy there. That fool looks like a clone. Paul.
Yeah, there is. There's a theory. Go look at the PID theory. If you don't know the PID theory,
That
it's
fool
a
died a
fun
long
theory.
time ago in a car crash.
1966.
There you go. This guy knows.
No,
God.
pay attention to that theory. It's fun, man.
It
It's the
is.
funnest conspiracy theory
It's probably the only thing I
ever.
really do know about Beatles.
Yeah.
Wow.
But by the way, the
So-
Beatles caught on to it, and John Lennon's like, let's fuck with the audience.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
started writing songs. I Am the Walrus is just to fuck with fans about, they think Paul is dead. Let's give him a theory song.
Yeah.
Just
Oh
so
my
that- yes,
God.
It's
yeah,
a whole
dude.
rabbit hole, dude. It's pretty
It's
good.
fucking great. It's
Wait,
fucking
so
great.
that's why the lyrics are so abstract
Yes,
and everything.
they don't
just-
mean anything. John has gone on record. John and Paul have gone on record to say
some type of to be able to get away with that.
they were geniuses,
Yeah.
man. I'm telling you guys. They went and literally said, somebody would say, "What is I Am the Walrus about?" It's literally about nothing. The song is about nothing.
How do you
sitting
feel
on the
like-
cornflake waiting for the van to come? It's about nothing.
How do you feel as a fan, though?
I
You
think
think it's the genius part, but
It's
you're
a
like, they're
genius-
laughing.
No,
at
I
me.
think
No, they're laughing at
anybody
people who
takes
took it
themselves-
Okay, yeah,
seriously.
there you go,
you
there you
know?
go, yeah.
Yeah,
Anybody takes them too seriously.
I'm a fan of the music, despite that. This is why I think they're geniuses. Look at I Am the Walrus. I'm the Walrus is a song about nothing, yet artistically, you could deep dive into this fucking thing like, whoa, like
Like you could make so many little like the Charlie Day, like where he's like putting all the little pins
you
and
can make
everything.
like, whoa, like, oh my gosh, they were talking about, you should have listened, you should have heard them kicking Edgar Allan Poe, like a poet or whatever, reading a story of Edgar Allan Poe. Like, you can still get into these
sitting on a
artistic-
cornflake, cereal, eating breakfast.
Even when they weren't trying,
Yeah.
they were trying. You know, like
No,
even when they were trying, they
I
could
see
just
what
make
you're saying there,
this
though. I
shit
see
like
that, like
That's cool.
they're geniuses, man. John and Paul are the greatest songwriters of all time. They just are. That's just a fact. Okay, it just is. Ask anybody. Castro and I got into an argument early. We got into an argument earlier into our friendship when we were casting for Depth of Field.
Yeah.
We were in the auditions at UTEP. You remember this?
Yeah.
Our auditions, we're just kind of sitting around waiting for the next actors to come, and we're kind of just hanging out. And then I said something like, I was probably playing the Beatles in the background. We were waiting, and I said something to Castro, which is my argument with anybody. Like, the Beatles are the best living band, the best band of ever into history. And he was like, why? Like, this Castro, this is what's awesome about Castro. I was like, well, why? Why do you say that? Because, and my argument has always been, name an artist for me. Name your favorite artist for me. Whoever it is.
Influenced by this guy.
Influenced by the Beatles. In one way or another, if it's an artist that they love.
And have yet to come up with an artist that.
all right.
And I think in that
Skrillex.
Skrillex was just in the great, well, not
He
just,
actually
but
did
he
a
was
remix with the Beatles.
he was in the Great Gatsby.
What?
He was in Gatsby, Skrillex.
Really?
Yes, Skrillex was in Gatsby. He was the pianist.
Oh, no way.
And sorry guys, I didn't put it on
no
silent.
way.
But yeah,
Dead Mouse.
Nah, but you already.
house music.
Yeah.
Nah, you got him with that, but he still got you though.
We'll get there.
You didn't even give me like you just said he's in Gatsby.
Yeah, but Gatsby, like, if you think about the music in Gatsby, it was curated by Jay-Z. Okay, it was curated by.
Don't give me that.
It was curated by Jay-Z.
Oh
my
He was a
God.
fan of the Beatles.
Don't give me that. Don't give me like, oh, the producer was
the
a
producer's
fan
name was
and he
Paul,
married the
you know,
daughter.
bro,
of the
they're both
daughter.
Paul.
I can't make this connection anywhere. And then Austin at the time, his argument was, we're getting to this argument about it. And again, Castro was throwing me names, and I was like, I would look it up, like, oh look, they were.
Yeah,
And
very
then
true. It did happen.
Austin said George Strait. I was like, boom, 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 right there, dude. He actually covered a couple Beatles songs in concerts. If
Oh
you
my
want
God.
this,
Yeah,
anybody,
like,
man.
I'll
There's
give you,
no.
like, I'll give
Playing
you that.
3 degrees of Beatles.
The only argument that ever stands, quote unquote, stands, and Beatles fans don't believe this, by the way. Beatles fans don't give a shit. Is Beatles or Stones? That's been the argument for however long. Are you a Rolling Stones fan or are you a Beatles fan? And what's funny about that is that Beatles fans, like true diehard Beatles fans, are like, if you pay attention, number one, the Beatles didn't even contribute to that. They loved the Stones. They were friends. The Beatles, John Lennon and Paul McCartney wrote the Rolling Stones' first 2 hits. They wrote those songs.
Really?
Because they were friends. They were
Really?
both in the UK. It was the British invasion of music at the time, and they were supporting each other. They were helping each other out. They were on a tour with the Stones. They weren't even called the Stones yet, if I'm not mistaken. And Paul and John met Keith Richards and, and Mick Jagger. And, oh, yeah, we're writing some songs. And there's, we don't like these. You guys want these songs? And those songs became Rolling Stones hits.
Damn.
And I forget which 2 songs they were, but it was the first 2 songs that broke them. So
I got him going.
they ask Paul this all the time, like, Beatles or Stones, like, what's the argument? He's like, dude, we're friends. Like, there's never been a competition.
We're homies. Like, what are you talking about?
Yeah. So what's funny about that is like New York kind of music fans are the ones that really push that in, and they're like Stones. It's more gritty. Everybody seems to think like the Beatles were these soft 50s Elvis types, and they're not.
It's because they had
really
so
not.
many stages.
Yeah.
They had like their love music, very like soft
Yeah.
stage.
Wow, they love
but
those shit. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, and then we
That
got
is- I never
into
thought
the
about that.
psychedelic shit, and then we got into. But in those
Their India
stages,
shit,
they were
yeah.
just
And the
they're
Stones
India
didn't?
shit.
Huh?
The Stones
No,
didn't.
the Stones were rock and roll, man. They
And
were just
they
they
stayed
kind of
pretty
pure.
rock and roll. I mean, if
Yeah.
you could put like all their songs on shuffle and they all feel like they have that same tone. But if you put all the Beatles songs on
Yeah.
shuffle, you get their early stuff, you get their
dynamics
late
is just
stuff.
like-
You get like
Yeah.
I know that my uncle he has the Beatles cover band.
That's right.
And
He does? That's
yeah,
cool. That's
he has a
cool.
Beatles cover band. Shout out to Ruben. wherever he is.
Yeah,
I think
I like this cover band.
I forgot what his band name is. I think it's like
Something with Beatles or not?
No, it's like Fade to Glory or something
Oh,
like that.
okay,
But,
okay.
yeah, but he I think that's just a real band. Anyway.
I know this because he told me when we were at that bar. Your
But
uncle.
a big thing is that he said he showed me like an article like when I was super young, and he says, "Did you know that at Oxford they're now teaching a class on music?
Yeah.
But it's only Beatles.
Yeah.
And it's just because he says that with understanding the different eras of Beatles, you can understand how almost every genre like developed and all that. Like,
song.
That's what he was
each
just saying.
song, literally. So what I was, it's cool that you say that about the Oxford thing because I genuinely think that you're right. Every genre that came after the Beatles was just an evolution from the Beatles music into it. So like, if you don't subscribe to using Wikipedia, whatever, but it's gotten substantially better at like fact checking and stuff like that. There isn't another artist that has a Wikipedia page on every single song, because every single song, how it was composed and what it's about or what the background is behind it, only the Beatles have that. Well, for whatever reason, right? Like for instance, your favorite song you were telling me was "Dear Prudence," which that was a beautiful sequence in the film, by the way.
yeah.
One of the best ones, yeah.
Dear Prudence was the Beatles were in India, and if you guys don't know who Mia Farrow is, famous actress, she was married to Woody Allen for a long time, and now there's a lot of controversy between that. I won't get into that, but Mia Farrow's sister, Ronan Farrow, was down at the time. It was just really sad, and John was a friend of theirs, so John was like, "I want to cheer her up," and they wrote Dear Prudence for her.
Oh wow.
That's where Dear Prudence came out of, Mia Farrow's sister. So like, just again, that background of songs like that. So like, nobody else has that. And I think to be able to use, Julie Taymor decided, I'm going to use, this is the most impression part of it, dude. An artist will have their whole lives. Somebody like Billy Joel or somebody like Elton John, they'll have their whole lives and make the best music in however time they have. The Beatles were only together for 6 years.
Everybody says that.
1963 to 1969.
How many albums?
That's a good question. 9?
In that,
Probably more. I think I'm wrong.
I mean, all the hidden, like the unreleased.
Well, yeah, no, but like albums.
Even
They were releasing
They
like
were
2
only
records
together
a
for
year.
like 6 years.
So 6 years, 9 albums.
I mean, officially as the Beatles, yes. Before that, they were the Quarrymen, and then there wasn't all of the Beatles. It was just like John and Paul, and then they recruited George because George was a schoolmate of Paul's, and then Ringo Starr was in another famous band already called the Hurricanes or something like that. Rory and the Hurricanes. And then they kind of got him because that band broke up, and they got him in because their drummer Pete Best got out of the Beatles and missed the train right before they got famous.
That's the worst.
They were in Germany, and that's really where they made rolled their bones and became the Beatles. But 1963 was the release of their first record. 1969 was the release of their last record. So
Wow.
they only toured from 1963 to 1966.
3 years.
They toured for 3 years. That's what they call Beatlemania. And Beatlemania was so bad.
Yeah.
Women fainting in the audiences and fighting over shit and pulling each other's hairs and causing riots, quite literally, in everywhere in parts of the world. So they decided, listen, this is getting dangerous. Number one. Number two, they started making music in the studio that they couldn't play live. Which is we get into like the Indian territory, sitars and like this psychedelic dubbing and just all this stuff that you do,
like
tripling, quadrupling their voices, you know.
But why?
Yeah.
Just in order so they wouldn't be.
No, that was just a direct effect. Like, hey, touring's
money-wise,
already getting dangerous, and
Okay.
we're creating more introspective music. Let's just stop touring. What the
Okay.
fuck are we touring for? And they started their own record label, which is a reflection in the film. The strawberry logo in the film. The company in the film is called Strawberry Jams with a Z, Strawberry Jams. Their actual record company is called Apple Corps.
Apple Corp.
Like corpse, like corporation. That's
like
the Beatles.
green apple thing. Yeah,
That's theirs. It was, you know how he's cutting the apple on the table and he's drawing
Yeah.
it because he's trying to get the fruit inspiration for the record label?
Yeah.
Beatles Apple Corps. When they started their own record label, they realized, oh, we can retain most of our money, right? So we don't have to tour.
Yeah, I was gonna say you can't stop touring.
Yeah.
If you don't. But damn, that's pretty smart though.
So they caught on to that a lot. And this is, let me tell you guys this story just because it's so fascinating, man. We could spend 3 fucking hours talking to Beatles. I can. Michael Jackson, post Beatles, he was with Wings, and then he did his solo career. He did a song with Michael Jackson.
Paul McCartney.
Paul McCartney. What did I say?
You said Michael Jackson first.
Oh, Paul McCartney did a song with Michael Jackson, post Beatles. And he was in the studio, and then Michael Jackson, this was like right, you know. I forget the name of the song, but they were in the studio together. This is Paul McCartney tells the story, and he tells Michael, "Hey, how's you been? You've been doing this since you were a little kid, but now you're on your own. You're not Jackson 5 anymore." This was right before he was getting big.
Yeah.
I think maybe not. Maybe it was right after the Bad album, or Thriller. It was in that vein. It was in that era.
Already big there.
And he tells yeah, I like it. Do you have any advice for me? Anything you have? He's like, yeah, get into music publishing. Own your own music. Buy other music from other artists.
Michael owned his own music?
After the fact, yeah.
After the fact, he bought his
masters.
That's true. That is.
And then he was like, "Oh, that's a good advice," because Paul McCartney, if you guys don't know this, one of Paul McCartney and John Lennon's favorite artists was Buddy Holly. Paul McCartney owns Buddy Holly's music. He owns the masters. So he told him, like, yeah, get into publishing, dude. That's how you're gonna make money. You're gonna retain rights to your songs. He's like, we didn't do that. We were stupid kids, and most of our early shit is owned by another company. And then Michael Jackson says, half jokingly, like, I'm gonna own yours. And then
he definitely had the money.
A couple years later, he bought the Beatles catalog. And until his death, Michael Jackson owned the Beatles music, sold it to Sony in part and to Apple Music, and then Paul McCartney and Yoko Ono have been slowly trying to buy back the music, the rights to their music.
But the real question is, do you think that is Paul McCartney?
Well, I love that theory, dude. It's very convincing. Anyways,
that's pretty dope that you know this, man.
It's just like, again, when you're a Beatles fan and you watch this film and you see all the little nods of like, not just the song stuff, like she came in through the bathroom window. It's such a fun thing, but like
that's kind of what I brought up earlier. I know that the story I think is really dynamic, really interesting, and it's especially if this was made as a stage play, it would be amazing.
Oh, funny that you say that. In the podcast, they told her that, like, why don't you go back to Broadway? Why don't you do more theater? She's like, I would love to make an Across the Universe Broadway show, but we get back into rights for music. At the time, it was easy because Sony owned the rights. Michael Jackson was...
Yeah, so it's easier to make a movie and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
But for a stage play, now she has to deal with 10 different people because Paul owns some of it now. Yoko owns some of it. Olivia Harrison, or George Harrison's wife owns it. Ringo obviously owns it. So now I'm dealing with a bunch of different people to make... She's like, I would do it in a heartbeat. If she's like, producers listening out there, if you guys can make this happen, I will direct it. I will direct the Across the Universe.
Each one of them,
yeah. So... It's tough, but
it's one of those where like I think it's super dynamic. I would love to, if there's some fictional universe where they can have a stage play of it, I'd love to see that. But again, I think a lot of the love for this film is that once you become a Beatles fan, I think you definitely see it.
You appreciate
on
on
a different perspective because little tiny things that happen. Like like when at the very beginning, it's Max, right? That runs out with all of his friends and everything, and you see them running through the corridors and everything like that. And and it's a little nod to Hard Day's Night. And if you don't know that, then it's just like it's just them running. But it's one of those things that super easy to go under the rug and we'll forget about.
Not just that, but like think about this for a minute. Even the PAD theory thing, right? Like Jim Sturgis, Jude. Austin right away cringed at this, but Jude is Hey Jude, the name of the song, right? The song was written for Jules, which was John Lennon's son, Julian Lennon. And they were getting divorced at the time. John Lennon and his ex-wife, I forget her name. They were getting divorced, and Jules was going through a hard time. So Paul McCartney saw this and was like, I see him sad. I'm going to write a song for him. He wrote Hey Jude for this kid.
The kid.
So this Jude character is what I'm saying is he has Paul McCartney's like charm and his personality and his melody. That's what Paul McCartney was known for. Being the charming Beatle and the most melodic. He was the better songwriter in my opinion because melodically he was a fucking genius. He still is a fucking genius. John Lennon was the artsy guy. John Lennon went to art school. He drew. He knew how to draw physically like art. That's why he married Yoko because Yoko was an artist.
Yeah.
So like,
she's cool.
Jude, the character, is a combination of them both.
Yeah.
He's the charming, melodic guy.
Who's the face? Who's the face? Was it Paul?
Yeah, absolutely.
No, okay.
And everybody says, like, if you've seen Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox thing, when they're dropping acid to the Beatles in India, it's like, well, I am the leader of the Beatles. Like it's because that argument goes back and forth. You're either a John guy or you're a Paul guy. I'm a Paul guy.
Yeah.
But my favorite Beatles not Paul. In the argument, I choose Paul. My favorite Beatles George Harrison. I think George Harrison was the quiet Beatle who Love the Blues, whose every song he wrote for the Beatles is a gem. He did While My Guitar Gently Weeps. This is one of my top 3 favorite songs of the Beatles. He did Here Comes the Sun. He did I Me Mine, which I Me Mine is one of my top 3 too. So like the George Harrison, if he would have written more songs for the Beatles, he probably would have been one of the best songwriters, if not competing with these dudes. By the end of it, when you got into Let It Be and Abbey Road, he was competing and he didn't want to be. Which is what part of the if there's a new documentary on that on Apple.
No, I
What's
think
it called?
on Disney.
On Disney Plus, you're right. Peter Jackson directed it. The director of Lord of the Rings. It's called I think it's called Let It Be.
Yeah.
Let it be.
Because it was a recording
yeah,
session.
yeah,
It was a
recording of the last
It's
album.
literally just a big ass one take almost thing of like them making the album. They didn't know what it was going to be. Their last album was going to be Abbey Road, and then they got into this session and they started writing songs.
Beautiful.
You see in the documentary George Harrison being the first one to quit the band. He's like, I'm fucking done. Like, I'm out of the group. I guess I'm
And
out of the
you
group. I'll
always
see you
saw,
guys. Like, George
You
Harrison
also
was
saw Paul
like,
McCartney trying to balance everybody
keep
out,
things together.
and then
but he was a control freak too.
Yeah,
you know,
he was a
that's
control
part of
freak.
the reason he was the control freak. John Lennon, they asked Paul McCartney, who broke the Beatles up then? And Paul said, John.
Oh, yeah.
I can tell you. It was John that officially. They, by the way, they broke up in Disney World. In case you guys didn't know.
Really?
in Disney
Were they
World.
on the roller coaster when it happened?
Yeah, they really. No, they officially
Guys!
they were at a resort and they officially disintegrated the band like legally on paper in one of the
Wow.
hotel
Damn,
rooms.
man. Like with all
Yeah.
paperwork and stuff.
They had cameras there and shit, man. Like it was just, yeah. But
I hope they had a conversation before all that.
Oh,
'cause,
they do.
damn,
I mean,
that's
this was
just
10
business.
years, 10 years after
Oh,
the
okay,
fact.
okay,
Like,
okay,
this was
okay.
1970.
I know it's business, but damn,
1970.
crazy.
So, like, they, again, you're right. If you're a Beatles fan and you can appreciate all the homages and all the nods and the construction of the
I just
film.
think it adds so much
Yeah.
more. And if
Uh-huh.
if you're not, I'm not going to say don't watch this film
Yeah.
or you're not going to
But that
find
was a
something out
question,
of the
huh?
film.
Like,
Yeah,
what-
because at the end of the day, as a musical,
yeah.
I think
It's strong.
It's super strong, super dynamic. I loved all the
I
the
thought
symbolism to
personally,
like the times and all that kind of
yes,
stuff.
That's what I
yeah.
loved about it. The
Personally,
60s.
and that was, by the way, it's like rappers, man. Like, it was a reflection of their time. They were immigrants in the States who couldn't get drafted.
Yeah.
They were writing songs. For instance, Blackbird is about the civil rights movement. So it's called Blackbird. I mean,
Blackbird, yeah.
they were writing, they're fans of people like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and they were part of the revolution as much as they could be. They lived in the States. They didn't really go back to London
Yeah.
after that. So, like, they saw this shit happening in front of their eyes too, man. Like, revolution and all these songs are based out of Vietnam, coming out of Vietnam and the war. So, this goes into that too, right? So, but the reason I bring that up too is because if I thought you were going to appreciate, personally, knowing you, I thought you were going to appreciate the use of art in the film.
Oh well, I do.
In terms
and
of
that's-
color, in terms of art placement,
No,
in
and
terms
even
of like the
I-
sculpting
what
and all
I
of that.
loved, surprisingly more than anything else, was the choreography. The
choreography,
for
you're right.
This was
It's
insane.
phenomenal.
The first one that really just, blew me out of the water was all the businessmen and
Oh,
a
that's
lot
great.
of, a lot
That's
of
great.
those moments where they're all dancing in unison, but there's what is it called? This formality to the way that they're all moving, and they're all moving the big crowd walking towards the camera and just doing these tiny little shifts, and it really does throw you in the sea of New York
And then
and
that
that
makes me
feeling.
think, like, how many takes it took that? Like,
No,
to
yeah,
get
it perfect.
Well, that's the thing. I
Get it
feel like with
perfect.
musicals,
By the way, in the behind the scenes, the Max, Max, they show when he was getting recruited, and all the soldiers have the exact same face.
Oh, yeah.
They showed the rehearsal of that, and he did, like, they showed him flipping into the thing, taking off his pants, like the whole in
I
rehearsals
want
they were
that,
doing
dude.
this.
That's super impressive. Like when
That's
you see him go
impressive.
there and the choreography where he's able to look
Yeah.
again, it's looking like you're being manhandled.
Yeah.
But it's done so uniformly.
Dude,
and
as a director,
poetically
again,
that,
they were discoveries. Sure, they were actors. I'm sure they studied in certain things, but they were discoveries. To get those performances from people who weren't seasoned actors is fucking amazing.
That's
And
dope.
stars. Joe Cocker comes out in this. So if you don't know who Joe Cocker is, you know his music in one capacity or another. Bono comes out in this
Oh, yeah,
fucking
Bono,
film.
roll.
Like, even to get that performance from Bono's fucking amazing.
It's wonderful.
He's a music, he's not an actor per se.
No, and I feel like his was so well placed because it's those people who had these very soothing voices that could just say the right words to get anybody to follow them. And it was again the Eggman song.
What was the line? I love the line when he's like standing on the bus. We're navigators. We're eating taters. We're masturbating alligators.
Yeah, like
we're frontier. We face frontiers. He's fucking natural, man.
Yeah,
so natural.
It's great.
But I think the art, the use of color, the use of for instance, there's genius portions that Julie Taymor talks about that she like fought for stuff like this, and a lot of it was improvised. And as a director, this is the freedom I want. Like, especially in a big studio picture, 45 million is no small film, especially at the time.
Oh yeah.
If I have the ability to do something like this, when we're talking about the Strawberry Fields duet, that duet is fucking beautiful, man. And they're not even in the same continent when they're fucking making this thing, right? So like, he's in the war while the other one's having a war of his own, but he's doing the strawberries as grenades and the projection.
Even the first, I guess. I don't know how you would call it, what the right film term for it is, but that montage at the very opening of the film of like the waves,
the Helter Skelter thing.
Yeah, well, like the waves are coming in, and as the ocean waves are coming in, so is the waves of riots and the waves of change, and the waves of revolution.
Mark Grady definitely.
The emotional wave, the emotional waves of what these characters.
The
we see the montage of the film. We see the whole picture in the waves.
That was that opener.
That's what I mean. Those artsy factors just reminded me a lot of like at Eternity's Gate and just like that type of thing.
I love all of it.
So
I love the choreography. Again, a lot of my score went back to I wanted to have a conversation to really understand if this could stand alone or if it's too much that you need to be a Beatles
that's what
fan.
I mean, like just on the directing front, on the filmmaking front. This is the last thing I'll say because I know we're at 60 minutes already. But that scene, that duet, the Strawberry Fields Forever duet between two men is probably the most emotional scene in the film. And they're not even in the same room. He's in Vietnam in a war singing Strawberry Fields Forever. He's in a studio. The strawberries are dropping like grenades, and then the projection of
each
the projection
other
on his face, on each other's faces. That was practical. That was done practically. And they shined a projector on her face, and they thought about it on the day of.
Really?
They're like, we just got to this place of like, oh, we already got the Jim Sturgis footage. Let's project this and see if this does something here. And they did. And they project, again, Julie Taymor is just a genius, man. I was getting to an argument last night with Robert, a friend of ours. He said, I said, I think she's in my top 10 list of directors, and she hasn't done these. She's not regarded as that to anybody, I don't think, or to many people. But she's definitely my favorite female director. Hands down, bar none.
Oh, wow.
I mean, and we got into argument. He's like, "What about Catherine Bigelow?" I was like, "Catherine Bigelow's great, man, but Julie Taymor's so underrated, and her artistic value and contribution to cinema, theater, art, like, you really need to acknowledge where that's at."
Yeah.
Now we have people like Greta Gerwig, and we have people like there's female directors are a big voice, and I'm so happy that they're getting the chances they're getting. But Julie Taymor should be offered more movies, man, and she doesn't because she did an indie last year that went to Sundance. Nobody really paid attention to it, so that's kind of where she's at right now. But I think she's choosing most of the older directors we've talked to. If you think about it, like Kevin Reynolds, who we just talked to, he said, I'm not in the rat race anymore, man. I'm not gonna go fight for money from some big corporation or some big studio just to tell the story I want to tell, and then they end up changing it anyways.
True.
I'm not going to be in that rat race. I'd rather make a smaller. Francis Ford Coppola has said, like, I'd rather make a film in the $5 to $10 million range where I have all the control than to make a $50 million, $100 million film and then the studios have to tell. The only people who've earned stuff like that now is Spielberg and Scorsese.
Yeah,
but
they're going to give them $100 million budgets and then not going to change a single frame of their fucking films, you know?
But because I've seen like why that's happening is just studios want their money back. And
that's always been the case.
Yeah, and then what happens is that when more people give you money, there's more hands in the pot. So there's always kind of like, oh, well, now we want to have greater flows.
Streamers are changing that a little bit more because when it's Netflix, for instance, gave Scorsese the money for the Irishman when Paramount couldn't, because now the studio is owned by multiple corporations, more hands in the pot. Netflix is just Netflix.
So you're saying,
And they're making money. 100 million is a tax deduction for them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So like they can afford to like, all right, yeah, it's Scorsese. Even if this shit doesn't do well, we don't care if it does well in the theaters. We care if people come watch it on Netflix.
Yeah.
So it is changing the landscape. You know, we've been talking about, but that still doesn't change the fact that people like Julie Taymor are not getting the story she wants to tell. You know, she
So
says,
risking
"I
that,
have scripts that I love, that I've shopped around, that I can't get made." And why? I mean, she's a fucking amazing storyteller that deserves that treatment.
And again, it's sad because when you look at like filmmaking as an art form, the sad matter of fact is that the origins of filmmaking have always been very financially tied.
Well,
it's always been that it has to have some purpose. It has to get sold. It has to get made.
Yeah.
It's never just been made for the sake of it just being film.
But that's the difference, right? If you make an art piece and you spent $5,000 on this art piece to make it, and you're trying to sell it for 10, well, that art piece can sit on the wall for a year, 2 years until it gets sold. A film can't, unless now streaming is changing the landscape. But you're right. I think that's where we're at. But I still think studios, streaming services, you guys need to get your head out of your ass. Like, Julie Taymor is a fucking amazing filmmaker and deserves something like this. But anyways, just again, if you can deep dive more into the Beatles and just deep dive into the trivia section of IMDb, read what these songs mean in this film and to popular culture and to history.
And even if you can't, I feel like the lyrics do a wonderful job as far as pushing the story forward. Yeah, they do a wonderful job as pushing the story forward. Helping you connect with the characters, and then it's not a cheesy little love story. This one has so much depth for the times, and
and it could have been, by the way. Yeah, it could have been.
It could have been super cheesy. It could have been just a bunch of love songs. But
listen, I think she compromised where she could. I'll say this little last thing. I don't know if you guys noticed, if you guys paid attention to that, but in the with a little help from my friends scene, they're smoking a joint.
Oh yeah,
but you don't see it.
Oh yeah,
and you think I deduced it to it's like a roach, and they're broke college students, and they're just
what was it?
It wasn't in the scene. The reason for it is because if they would have showed drug use, it would have been a rated R. It's PG-13.
But what's so funny is that they all do that, and then they cut to that guy coughing up smoke, even though again it's.
If I were her, I would have been like, it's cold. It's just coffee, whatever, just to get the PG-13 rating. A PG-13 rating guarantees more seats in the theaters.
Yeah.
So that's what I mean. She compromised where she could. She didn't show drug use in a fucking film where drugs were prevalent.
Yeah, even though I think when they were on the bus, they started showing a lot of drug usage, but they wouldn't show drugs. They did or they'd show pills falling, but that's it.
The punch, the pink punch.
Yeah.
The pink punch, the LSD punch.
Yeah.
The funny thing is that really tore the Beatles apart when they started doing acid because George Harrison and John Lennon, first time they ever dropped acid, they were at their dentist's house.
What?
They were at their dentist's house in a party, like a cocktail party, and the dentist gave it to them in a punch or a tea, you gotta try this, this and that.
That's some cool
and they
stuff.
did it without Paul. And Paul was like, fuck you guys, man. This is something we should have all tried together. And he ended up doing it later. But these guys were dropping acid after that a lot.
Oh my
Inspired a lot of their music, right? So a lot of people will make the argument, the final song in the film, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. LSD.
Yeah.
Right? Or when the doctor gets to the other doctor's house and it's the League of Spiritual Deliverance, LSD. Shit like that, which again of the tell of the era.
Nice.
But there's stuff like that that's very drug use, but very smartly crafted so that it doesn't do something. You could show this film to a kid.
You can show it to anybody.
I mean, you really can.
I'll say definitely went up. I'm sitting at a stronger 8.5.
Okay.
Just because. Yeah, there's so many dynamics. I mean, we didn't even get to talk about it too much, but I also love the arc of every character that you meet. Every character you meet has their own arc and their own story, and anytime you see any little update on their story, it just gets better, you know. And I
to that point, as a filmmaker, because it is one of my favorite films. When we were making one of our films, just passing through. It was I got the title from this film. I got the title from a piece of art on the wall.
Nice.
That's literally a person passing through another person. And it says on top, just passing through. I told Austin, I was like, we should name it this. when we're doing just passing it for the
Hey,
48 for the
that's
Agbo
pretty
thing,
awesome.
I was like, I'm gonna use this, and a lot of the stuff like I love films. I've noticed lately that my pattern for either writing films or just my love for cinema draws a lot from like my favorite types of films are I'm gonna leave my surrounding, I'm gonna leave this city to do something great. This is what Goodwill Hunting ends at, right? I'm gonna leave my situation here to find something better.
Yeah.
Or I want them to see each other again, this couple, this love, this whatever, in this setting where like that's the last shot of the film.
Yeah.
So like Town Square Tale,
Yeah.
right? I did that directly. Like she's
Yeah.
walking through the park. He plays the song. He
That's
hears the song. She hears the song and comes back to him.
Yeah.
And the last shot is just them looking at each other. So like this did a lot to inspire me as a storyteller.
I see.
Inadvertently and I don't know,
No,
subconsciously,
it's-
but you know.
There's a lot to take away from this, especially,
Yeah.
I think in storytelling. I mean, sometimes we talk about musicals. It's like, okay, what did this do for musicals? But this
Yeah.
is very much like I can see where this transcends being just a musical or just a
Yeah.
movie, and it does feel like a piece of cinema, art form.
Yeah.
And how to tell a story in a way that only she can.
Yeah. So I'm still saying at a strong 9.
I think I'm at a 9 now.
At a 9.
Yeah. I'll go
You were
3
at a
points.
8.5?
8.7.
8.7. 8.7.
Yeah.
And then
go 3
Austin,
points,
any
man.
changes?
From a soft 8 to a strong 8.
I like it.
I like it.
Got a little chub there.
Yeah.
Got a little half
That was
chub.
good.
Got a little friction or something.
Thank
So,
you for
please-
introducing us to this film.
Yeah, I love this film. It's something again that I will revisit time after time. And again, if you're a Beatles fan, or hopefully like me, this film makes you a Beatles fan and you realize why they're so important
Oh, yeah.
and why their music matters and even in terms of cinema, like this contribution to cinema isn't really paid attention to. Yeah.
Before we go, what's the one album you would recommend? Like nobody's heard the Beatles. Could you start with the first one?
No,
I'd say
because
do
it's
Abbey
it's so
Road.
different. Yeah,
Yeah,
Abbey
'cause-
Road or
Road Abbey.
Road Abbey. No, Abbey Road for sure.
Abbey Road.
Abbey Road is probably their best written album. My favorite album of theirs is Rubber Soul.
Oh,
Rubber Soul, I think, is a really strong one to start out.
what's your
too.
favorite song from there?
Drive My Car, probably, or
Really?
I don't know. That's a good
I think my
question.
second favorite's Sgt. Pepper.
Sgt. Pepper.
Sgt. Pepper is the best concept album ever made.
Really?
People now do concepts. Ziggy Stardust, David Bowie is a concept album.
Yeah.
Sgt. Pepper's kick started all that shit, man. Like Jimi Hendrix. Fun fact about Jimi Hendrix. We'll end on this fun
Fun
fact.
fact.
Fun fact about Jimi Hendrix. If you guys don't know, Jimmy spent a lot of time in the UK. That's where he met Clapton. That's where he met Paul McCartney. And Clapton, like, fucking hated Jimi Hendrix because of how good he was as a guitar player, to the point where his manager introduced him to Jimmy, and Jimmy was like, "Hey, can I get on stage and you can play a little set, Brett McTardy?" And he's like, "Yeah, kid, come on up," And he outplayed
Oh,
Clapton.
I love those
Clapton
dudes.
got off the stage pissed, went to his manager, and he's like, "Why don't you fucking tell me he was that good?"
He just stole all my shine.
Yeah. And then the Jimi Hendrix Experience, we're doing a show in London, and Paul, he heard Paul McCartney was going to be there. That was the day that Sgt. Pepper dropped. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band dropped. And because he knew Paul was going to be in the audience that morning, they learned the song just to play for Paul.
Just for play for Paul.
But remember, this is the day before chords, before seeing charts on the internet or finding this record came out that morning, and they were just like,
They were built
"We're gonna
different.
learn this shit
Yeah.
because Paul's coming."
Didn't
I
they
know.
have like beef or like the Beatles got mad at him for some reason?
At Jimi Hendrix?
Yeah, like I don't know what it's
I don't
from,
know.
but there's a video that shows Paul McCartney like interacting with Jimmy right before the show,
And it doesn't end
like he was just like, oh, go ahead and have a great fucking show or something like that. But
I don't remember
there
that.
was something.
I mean, maybe I don't know.
But
then
I've
they
heard
get-
about that interaction. I've
Yeah.
heard about that where basically just that same day they like quickly started hearing the lyrics and then he performed.
And by
it
the way, JoJo in the film Malcolm, I forget. I think it's Malcolm. I forget the name of the actor, Malcolm something. But JoJo, the character is modeled after Jimi Hendrix.
yeah, and you could tell
Yeah, for sure.
I mean,
the hair,
Afro,
and
the
the
Who else
guitar
would it be,
aspect,
bro?
yeah. No, it's modeled after Jimi Hendrix, So
Great film.
But anyways, great
Love
film. Please check it out. I love this picture, and we got to see it in Dolby Atmos at my house, which is awesome. This version, the
guy's
4K
showing off
Dolby
his-
Atmos thing is fucking great. But I just love this film. I really do.
I can see why.
It's a terrific picture. So thank you guys for checking it out. And
next week.
next week is Mr. Michael Lalal's pick.
We're gonna take a heavy turn.
We are going to take a heavy turn.
A rough turn. These guys have seen it, and I don't think you've seen
We saw it
it.
over pandemic. I think.
Yeah.
Which one?
It is a anime film called Perfect Blue.
Perfect.
Perfect Blue.
Yeah, Perfect Blue. It's inspired
Doesn't
a
even
bunch of
sound-
scenes from like Requiem for a Dream and Inception.
Girl with the dragon tattoo.
I like that,
Yeah.
okay.
So there's a lot of scenes that it's inspired to other films, and that's what got me turned on to it because
Yeah, it
again,
was a reference from a lot for a lot of
it
for sure.
takes animation and the fact that there's no limitations in what you can do in animation and creates these stunning visuals and it's
You know, ever since you showed us that Christmas one,
Christmas one.
A family man.
No, it was an anime one.
No. He
Oh,
picked
Klaus.
it. Klaus.
Cloud.
Klaus.
Yeah, you picked it.
You picked it. I thought he
I
picked
think I picked it. Yeah, I just.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say if you picked it, all right, I'll give this
I
one
don't
a try.
know that it's
'cause that was-
anime. I wouldn't say anime. Hey, Klaus?
No,
It's just like a
he's
specific
just saying
animation.
that after he saw an animated film like Klaus,
Oh.
that he appreciated it.
Yeah, man. Klaus is fucking terrific.
No,
No,
but,
I think I picked that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, but for what is it called? Perfect Blue.
Perfect Blue.
It's definitely not like again. Sometimes when people hear like anime, they think of like
Oh, this
the
heavy.
Dragon Ball Z and all that kind of stuff
This
and the
is
big.
super heavy.
That's why I
Yeah.
got so excited.
Yeah,
It's not.
No, this one's.
I mean,
a,
it uses the techniques of anime.
it's a thriller. It's a psychological
Yeah, I'm down
thriller.
for it. It
I think you're gonna
And
like
it's-
it. It's
yeah.
right in your wheelhouse.
Yeah, starring.
It's
Jake
about an
Gyllenhaal.
actress.
Perfect
It's a thriller. Yeah, dude. I think you're gonna.
Jake Gyllenhaal definitely could have been in this movie.
I'm
But
excited.
yeah, Perfect Blue. It's gonna be a heavy ride, but I'm excited to rewatch it with you guys.
Go check it out. It's a
Yeah.
terrific picture. We'll see you guys next week on the WatchTower podcast. Thank you guys for joining us this time. And if you have any film suggestions, please let us know. Help us by subscribing to the podcast
It just
wherever
takes
you
a
listen to
click.
podcasts
Just
on
click.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Please help us share this podcast. We do this naturally. We don't get sponsored. We don't get paid doing this. We do it because we love cinema and we want to
Absolutely.
curate cinema and tell people about what we love in
Exactly.
terms of that. So we just do it because we love it.
Yeah.
And it gets us excited. I don't know about you guys, but I'm excited every time we're going to talk about whatever picture it is and we get into that conversation. So
Yeah,
I
but
hope
stay
it is the same
tuned.
for you guys. But yeah,
Subscribe everywhere. We're on YouTube if you want to watch the video portion, or if you want to listen to it, Spotify and everywhere where
Yeah.
podcasts are available. That's where we're on. Yeah.
thank you guys for joining us this week on the WatchTower podcast.
And don't forget, we love you.
Love you.
Good night, everybody.